Did you go to the golf course? Yeah. Cool. What does the work do that? What did they say?
All right, guys, 7 o'clock on the dot. Thanks for making time and joining for this Coach's Corner Zoom call. Counted an honor just to be able to spend an hour with each one a part of the call here this evening. Again, feel real free on if you do want to answer to a topic or if you are more in a listening mood. My mom's 80 years old and often reminds me that I should listen more than talk, and for sure will be one of those doing most of the listening this evening. Before we get going, I want to say I respect every one of you guys on this, and in this time of adversity, now is the time when I think leaders lead with the most strength during this time of crisis, and may we all learn from each other this evening to where we can pass that on to our families and the friends and coaches we're influencing and the players that will maybe be playing for you in the year to come. Before we get after the first question, Coach Brad, who I've got a ton of respect for, is just going to open in a short word of prayer, and then we're going to get after it.
Yeah, Heavenly Father, we just thank you for your goodness. We thank you for such a beautiful spring day, and we just ask that you bless this time, bless our conversation, bless the men that have committed time to being on it, and also in that, just bless the players that they're sowing into. We love you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Guys, if we can use the Zoom group chat, Daryl Baxendall gave me a ring there this afternoon who I got a ton of respect for, and he thought that might be a good tool as we go through some of these questions. Thinking maybe, 15 to 20 minutes on each question. So, feel free if the question rings a chord with you. Please share with us, and then we jump to the next question. And there might be some other guys that want to share. Everyone's confident and look forward to listening to everyone. First question, as you see it, how do you motivate your team, and how do you manage the ice time on your bench? Now, that could be a short bench, that could be 4 lines deep. Barrett, why don't you start us off, and we can start this call together.
I missed the very first part of that question. I heard the managing bench, but I didn't catch right before that. Sorry. Yeah,
what are some unique ways in how we motivate our team? And segue to that, how are we working to manage ice time? Whether we have a short bench, 4 lines, start of the season, mid-season. How might you respond to those 2 questions?
Barrett Kropp from Trinity Western University out here in Vancouver. Langley actually, but they say we're part of Vancouver, so I have to say that, I feel. It's so great to see so many faces, by the way. It's a great group of guys. Johnny, appreciate the work you put in to get these guys together, and glad we can hang out a little bit here, man. That's a great question. Motivating guys, I think we just try to keep it fresh. Some of you guys know Chris Trendle, otherwise known as Marty. He's my assistant coach, and between him and Dirk DeWall and myself, we try to keep things fresh. And say for example our pregame talk, one night Marty will get up and do like the boys on the bus from the Oilers dynasty, and call out the lineup and call guys by different names and give them a little kind of who let the dogs out. And then other nights I'll try to give some little motivational talk or whatever, but just keeping it fresh so it's not just sort of the same voice. And just kind of doing that. And then in terms of managing lines and benches, I find that I'm learning actually that the guys just want to know where they're at. And so instead of feeling that, and you guys all know, well, not all of you guys know, but some guys I know on this call, like I wear my heart on my sleeve, and I can get kind of emotional and get maybe attached to guys in certain ways and give guys second, third, fourth chances. And so But what I'm learning in the midst of that is it's okay if guys get upset, and it's okay if they feel that they're down on like they just want to know where they're at in the depth. And instead of sort of just pussyfooting around it a little bit, they really appreciate the transparency on them knowing where they're at. And at least they know that they've got a chance to move up ahead of that, where if you think they're in the third pairing and they think that they're in the top pairing, then you say, okay, we'll prove it to me in practice. And so when it comes to just game management, earlier in the season, we try to roll. And then of course, at the end, we kind of go with our horses. And this year coming up, I was just saying before everyone sort of got on here, and Brewster and I were just chatting, we're going to probably, our league this year, Canada West, is going to be trimmed down to 20 games most likely. And so I don't know, we'll probably shorten the bench in September. Like 20 games, man, that's playoffs, right? Like we're already in playoffs come September, 20 game schedule. So it'll be a lot different this year for sure.
Thanks, Barrett. Maybe moving down a whole number of age groups to a younger level. Graham Schlender's joining us. Welcome, Graham, from Halifax. Graham, is there a chance you can share with us from your perspective? Graham's had a chance to be to an NHL camp. He's played pro overseas, and this past year was working with some younger kids. Is there a chance you can share with us just how you manage ice time, your perspective, and how you motivated your kids this past year?
Oh, thanks, Brewer. Yeah, I mean, it's a different dynamic when you're dealing with young kids. I mean, motivation is like a lot of rah-rah in the dressing room, and to Barrett's point about finding different ways to keep it unique and fresh from one game to the next. I think trying to find those trigger points as far as where kids are still excited about the game. We were huge motivators as coaches, and came in the dressing room with a lot of energy and focus. So routine was really big for us, and at the Pee Wee level, we're big into helping kids understand what routine looks like. So being on time at the rink, same kind of warm up and so on as you go through the pregame, and then some of that visualization that starts to come into the kids' game that is something they have to start considering as they start getting into more competitive hockey and they start to grow in their sport. So yeah, I just like a lot of it though is really kind of tugging on the heartstrings and finding that spot deep inside of them that is going to somewhat motivate them. And it's really raw at that age, right? They're sponges. Most of those kids that want to be competitive are ready to go. So it's fairly easy. I would find it interesting at the higher level or the older level to understand, like some of those kids start getting attitudes and that sort of stuff. So it's a little bit different dynamic when they're a lot younger. But as a whole, it's actually, that's probably the purity of the game is when you're young and they're really listening and they really care because they feel like you got something to offer. So that's refreshing for sure.
Emery, with the East Coast focus, it sounded like you had a sold out almost every game, packed house. There was a good buzz. How did you work with your team this past year regarding these two questions? Can you maybe share with us a bit?
Yeah, I think game time motivation wasn't something we spent a lot of time. Our guys wanted to play, especially at home. A lot of what we were doing was trying to calm them down and remind them that we're just having some fun and things like that. But as far as the motivation part, we kind of went at it with the prescription of ice time. So we have both of my assistant coaches have earpieces in, and we have a guy doing time on ice real time so that we know how much time guys are eating up. And we remind them that, if we can't rely on you for 10 to 12 minutes, then you're not going to be doing us enough favors that we're going to invest a ton of time long term, obviously, to bring you along. But between 10 and 12 minutes for your fourth liners is really only leaving. I think our top forwards were getting 16 minutes. So we were making sure everyone was playing and everyone had a role. And the prescribed ice time, though, when you go into a game and you can tell a player exactly what he's earned through that week of practice or through the focus level or the body of work that you're kind of prescribing from, really helped. As soon as we started doing it, we noticed guys, trying to push their 11 minutes into 12 minutes, and a lot more conversations were started of, how do I get another minute? How do I get some power play time? How do I get some penalty kill time? And when they know that, it all starts with your practice and off ice and workout habits, it kind of starts the right conversations, and the players were pretty eager to figure out, if we were hitting their prescriptions, which we were usually pretty accurate with that, and B, how they could get another 30 seconds the next weekend, another minute 30 the next weekend, and turn into a 15-minute forward or a 20-minute defenseman.
Interesting. Coach Harnett, coming from the MGHL, can you share with us a couple points or thoughts on that topic?
Yeah, those are some great answers. I think, with us, it's a challenge, every game. I think roles are something that I think all of us coaches, we struggle with I guess communicating with certain players and, what type of player, we see them and sometimes what type of player they see themselves, and kind of finding that balance, getting your group to sorry, my Siri's going off here. Getting your group to, to buy in, I think is big. And I think, that's something that we're challenged with daily. But I, with us, what we try and do is make sure that, players rewarded for certain things and acknowledged, whether it's, they're blocking shots, they're winning a lot of face-offs, their physical elements there. And we try and reward them throughout the game with that. I with us, we don't really, I guess with analytics, we look at ice time and how much ice time a player is getting, and sometimes it's too much, and you notice a drop off and maybe, their performance, and you can tie it into that. And I know we ran into that situation this past season. We had a few of our, I guess you would say, top 6 players kind of went through a bit of a slump, and I noticed that we were giving them a little too much opportunity, and specialty teams on both ends of it, penalty kill, power play. So we backed them off and gave some guys more opportunity, and we found a better balance, and we found more success from the team that way. But I think the biggest thing with us in managing ice time is not everybody's going to get equal ice time, and one of the biggest factors that we live by on our team is humility and buying into it. It's not easy, and if you can get a group of players to really be humble and buy into that humility, I think it makes it a lot easier for us to do that and maybe hold guys back at certain times. But I think the biggest thing is just noticing sacrifices and good play and rewarding players is kind of the guideline we go with. And it's important too that you've got certain players you want to match up against other teams' top lines or checking lines, whatever it may be, and getting these guys to realize that how important that is. And so I know that's I was kind of all over the place there, but I think the biggest thing with us is humility, and we find that if our guys buy into it, then managing ice time becomes a lot easier for us.
Yeah, that's good. Guys, a quick snapshot. I could talk for a while, but Coach Harnett has given a ton of time at the Bantam and midget level in Edmonton with SSAC and helped develop a number of world-class players. He's got a big heart for Indigenous hockey as well. Was the head coach for Team Alberta in 2012, where he led the team to the gold final. And Harnett, great to have you on the call. Look forward to future calls together. Peter Hay, it's awesome to have you on board. Coming back to the West Coast and the age you're coaching, can you share with us regarding those 2 points? Provide some insight.
Yeah, so Peter Hay from Abbotsford, BC, coaching major midget. Have coached Western Hockey League, played NCAA, so I have a bit of experience in the higher levels. But at the end of the day, I really enjoy working with the elite midget level kids and helping them to get to the next stage in BC Hockey League or the Western League. And so I'm the head coach of the Fraser Valley Thunderbirds in the BC Major Midget League. So just to give you some feedback of where I'm speaking from. But I think it really comes down to knowing your clientele. I think we'd all agree that when you have a team of 20 kids, there's 20 different personalities, 20 different mindsets, 20 different avenues of how to get to their veins and their spirits. And so for me, I try to really get to know my kids really well and build relationships with them and really understand what makes them tick. Every kid is obviously taken for what gives them the motivation to do stuff, right? Like some are more intrinsic. They got it. They don't need anything. They're almost too hard on themselves. Some need ice time, or some need a little hug every now and then, or I call it the jelly bean approach, where you throw them some jelly beans and then they perform for a bit. But at the end of the day, I think it's just knowing your people, knowing your clientele. At my level, I'd say pretty much every kid, all they care about is getting to the next level in general. So for them, it's, seeing opportunities in the next level, whether it's APing to a BC Hockey League team or connecting them to a scout or helping support their walk into the next level. As far as ice time and things, like, because we're a development program, I'm not worried about being fired for losing a game. So I don't have the same pressure as maybe a junior coach or a pro coach has, which is nice. And one of the reasons I like the level I coach at. But at the end of the day, for me, I sell that we develop 20 players. I don't develop 5 kids. I don't develop a first power play line. I'm really in the belief of developing 20 kids. And so I put a lot of time into my worst players and my best players. So it's like, no one gets favored. And for me, what I do is I try really, really, really hard to give these kids, an opportunity. So I think the only way for a kid to be motivated to play hockey is to have opportunity, because if they never have an opportunity to prove themselves, how do they ever, get that chance to be excited about going to the rink? So we have a kind of a not in a line, but basically we have a situation where we tell our team up until Christmas, everyone plays everything. Everyone plays power play. Everyone plays penalty kill. Everyone plays everything. And we obviously at Christmas start to, see who's our best penalty killers, who's our best power play guys. And then we really try hard. If you're on the power play, then you're not on the penalty kill. And if you're on the penalty kill, you're not on the power play, so that, everyone's getting ice. Because in our league, there's so many bad refs that unfortunately we have a lot of special teams. So if you're not on special teams, you don't play hockey, basically. So that's kind of how we divide it up. And just really goes back to just knowing your people, and when you know what makes them tick, find ways to be creative within it. Player meetings, goal setting, on the bench when they do something that you've been talking about, celebrate it. And when they're not doing it right, teach. Don't get mad at them, just teach. So that's my philosophy.
Yeah, that's awesome. Hey, Brenton, awesome to have you a part of the Zoom with all of us. Brenton's good friends with Coach Brad Cole. Brenton's played pro overseas. Coming from your lens, or from your sight lines, what did you notice with some of the pro coaches, how they would run a bench, whether it was the special teams topic or mid-season? What kind of insight can you share with us from your experience over in Europe?
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, okay. So my name is Brenton. I'm from Calgary. I'm actually not a coach. Never ran a bench, but I did play with Brad for a couple of years, once in junior and then again in pro. This is a tough question because, like, I can see it from a coach's perspective where you're trying to win games, but at the same time, you have to keep your players engaged for the entire season. And if you lose your bottom end guys, then you're really you're out of luck. I think one is honesty. I think if you knew where you stood with your coaches, then I really appreciated that. Like, I've had coaches before where I've been out of the lineup, but as much as it's tough to take, looking back on it now, 3-4 years later, you respect the man because he was honest with you, and I think you can get over that. They don't really play mind games with you. They're pretty straight with you. But certainly in the moment, it's tough as a player. I think if I were to give advice to coaches from a player's perspective, having never really been a top end guy, after junior, like always kind of being in a 5-6 role for the most part, I think it would be for coaches to understand that every single decision they make on every single player, like echoes throughout your entire lineup. So if you give an extra guy, or if you give a guy extra minutes, well, you know, everyone else is going to read into that. And I think sometimes you have to understand that, or you have to take the perspective of other players as well, not just being solely focused on, okay, I'm rewarding this player, but at the same time, while you're rewarding this one player, another player might take it totally different and think that you're potentially punishing them. And the best coaches I've had have picked up on that right away, and they'll pull you aside and say, it has nothing to do with you. It's just this guy is going, and you'll get your chance at some point. I'm not sure if that's helpful at all, but it's a real tough balance, I think.
Yeah.
The best coaches do a great job at it.
Yeah, no, that's really good insight. Guys, before we move to the next question, awesome to have Graham Thomas on board. Lucky guy, gets to live in the lower mainland BC. Probably doesn't see a whole lot of snow, but so proud of Graham and the journey the last 20 years. He's developed some championship teams. Graham, can you share with us just what you've learned over the years? What kind of insight you have on these two topics?
Yeah, for sure. And excited to be here. I recognize some guys. An old coach of mine is on this call as well, and some familiar faces, but excited to get to know everybody a little bit better as well. So thanks, John. A lot of really good things said, making some good notes here. I think probably the biggest thing that jumps out, a couple things I would say that's maybe a little bit different than what's been said already is just building relationships for us. I think that's important. So, you know, the players, it's, you know, cliche, but if they know how much you care, and then they'll, you know, then they'll perform better, and they'll learn more, and they'll be more receptive if we show as coaches that we care about them as people and not just players. So I think building relationships is important. And I think that helps, you know, with the motivation and also with the team buy-in and program buy-in. So that's really important in building that trust with the players. And that helps with the motivation. One thing as far as just like the energy and bench management goes and the pregame stuff, we mix it up similar to what Barrett talked about, and trying to keep it fresh, especially when we have players in our situation right now, similar to Barrett, where you have them for 5 years. And so if they're hearing the same message over and over, you got to keep it fresh and mix it up. But what we've found is our players, we've been getting them, they get too amped up. So we get them amped up and we pump them up and we get them going. And then we also got to be managing their energy and the consistency and the focus. So we also just are being aware of that. And we don't want to get them all up to here at level 10, and then they get out there and then they go down to 5 or 6 by the end of the period or by the end of the game. So it's kind of managing that energy. And then one thing that I think is really important is that hasn't been talked about yet is recruitment. And I don't know, everybody comes from different backgrounds here of, with minor hockey and whatnot. Maybe you have really a very, very limited control on that, on team selection. But for those at the junior level, pro, I guess, level, college, university level, is making sure, like for us, when we were in our winning days and won like 3 championships in 5 years and things were going, like, it was the players. It was they were internally motivated. They hated losing. They like loved to win. They were competing. Like they just had that in them. And it wasn't that hard to just, just open the gates and just let them go. And the leaders just kind of ran that, and it was infectious, and it just caught on, and it was extremely powerful. And it was easy for buy-in with that if the players have that. So for me, we've got away from that, and to be honest, the last couple of years, and we've just kind of been picking up skill or picking up this, or maybe not paying as much attention to it. And so that's something that been a big change of focus for us, is doing our homework and making sure the players that are driven internally, that want to compete, have that will to win, like that's the kind of players for us that we want. And so I think that could be something that could help. Other than that, there's always just we like rewarding our team. We do team theme stuff and just a big buy-in. I think some of that stuff's already been talked about, but we do a lot of that stuff and rewarding the team, find out what makes them tick individually, but also as a team, and having some fun. Like at the end of the day, you got to make sure they're having fun. And so let's reward them, whether it's like Dairy Queen blizzards after a win, whether it's whatever, find out what makes them go, whether it's some pictures at BP's on the, or whatever, and some drinks, like whatever works for the group and at that time, and within reason, obviously. But those are a few things that, kind of haven't been mentioned that are, I believe are important.
Oh, Graham, that's great. Guys, what a treat and an honor to have Dean McCalman on the call with us this evening. Dean, we really appreciate you making time. Very few in the NHL could skate like Dean or skate like Dean today. Dean, with your experience and the teams you've been a part of, and then with the team you're leading now, can we move to the next question? How do we teach, or how can we teach accountability? Where are some areas where you've seen it taught, and how have you maybe stole some of those secrets or implemented those within your current team around the topic of how we can teach accountability?
That's a good question. I actually had troubles. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
I actually struggled with that a bit this year. I was thinking about the whole motivation part, and how it was difficult to motivate my guys, but then also on the accountability part, at the junior B level, a lot of the players are very, their games are quite holy, I'll say. They're full of holes all over the place. And yeah, so it was difficult for me to pick certain situations of certain players to hold them accountable as far as their systems go, or as far as their performance goes in that way, because it just was not great all the way around as a whole. And I struggled with it as far as, well, if I start sitting kids out, there's no end to where that would be done. So for me, I let a lot of things go, which is why I say I struggled a bit with the accountability at the junior B level. I basically let things go until the point where they were starting to sacrifice and hurt the team, and then I would just sit the player out. I think I'm pretty lenient as a coach. I don't know if I would say I'm a player's coach, but I try and let them learn and let them make their mistakes, and, for the most part, just have conversations with them about what I think they're doing is good or what they're doing is bad. That's hurting our guys. And if it continues, then, it's maybe a day in the stands, or a night in the stands. So I don't know if I really have a good answer for that question, but that would be my answer.
Yeah. Kim, great to have you a part of the call. Kim Barnstable had a chance to cut his teeth in the Estevan area, and had a chance to coach university hockey. Kim, what can you share with us on the topic of accountability, and how you've had a chance in the past to influence on that topic?
You meaning Kramer?
Kim is, I want to say, maybe Kim isn't on there. It looks like Kim, it says Kim's iPad, but
Fuzz. Go for it. I'd love to hear what Suts has to say.
Hold on, I'll just get my video on here, guys. I was waiting to hear my dad's answer, but I think his audio isn't working, so I don't know. So rephrase the question again. Sorry, I was waiting to see if my dad's thing would load, but it doesn't look like it's going to load.
Kramer, great to have you on board. For everyone that hasn't met Kramer, Kramer right now is the goaltending coach for the Red Deer Rebels and has started and now runs a very successful goaltending school in in Red Deer called Stable in the Net. We're talking about accountability and how do you work with your goalies to help teach accountability?
Well, working for the Red Deer Rebels, they're definitely held accountable more than most teams' goaltending situations just because the style of the head coach, old school style. For my job, more or less, it's the accountability is there from the head coach and it's there from, owner, GM, head coach. So my job more or less is just to kind of make sure they're staying positive, making sure that they're not getting too worked up about being called out and being able to handle the pressure. Just that not only comes from now, you have kids getting pressure from all kinds of sides, but goalies at this day and age or in this level aren't used to handling head coaches beyond them. So from my standpoint, the accountability point for me is just making sure that when Brent's not around is that their practices should be the same whether he's there or not, because being that he's the owner GM, he misses a lot of practices. So if I see anything that's changing on a point of what their practice looks like, whether they're whether he's there or not, then that's worrisome to me. Usually, more than anything, they probably have stronger practices when he's not there, just because they're not feeling the pressure. So as far as accountability goes, I don't know if that helps answer your question about holding them accountable, but they're held accountable every day just by having that pressure from such a prominent voice and prominent figure that still has the old school philosophy. So my job is more or less just keeping them positive and keeping them from getting worn down a little bit.
That's good. Thanks, Kramer. Coach Brad Cole, awesome to have you a part of the Zoom. Can you share a little bit on the past year coaching in the ACAC and how you tried your best to teach accountability, some lessons learned this past year?
Yeah, I'll start. Actually, if I could ask Graham just a quick question, is that all right, John?
100%.
Hey, Graham, when you said you were having success in those years, and it came from that high compete, they didn't want to lose. Do you think that you were doing anything? Were you structuring your practices in a certain way that engaged that and drew it out of them, or was it just in those guys?
Oh, we would definitely, we'd have battle compete day every Tuesday and the players wanted it even more. And it got ugly. Like there's, you see it, whatever, with the St. Louis Blues or, fights in practice and that's the kind of environment that they created. So yeah, no, they're just like, they want it, they need that. Like they're just, and so you got to give it to them, so we would kind of, give them that compete and give them that battle and then just find times. And even like sometimes on a Thursday, we do a lot of specialty teams as to maybe a lot of, people at that university level at the same kind of schedule and game days, Friday, Saturday. But sometimes you just throw it in there just to keep them on their toes, just a quick 15-minute, 10-minute, 5-minute, go to even sometimes start practice with it. Like first team to score wins and you put, Gatorades or something on the line. And it just, you got to keep them keep it fresh, keep them guessing. And then just all of a sudden come up with something, all right, here we go. This drill, let's go, get into it. And then get them, they would just take over the game and it would get crazy, right? They'd get super into it. So I don't think we didn't want to do it too much because it may get old, but we just kind of strategically placed it in there to just give them enough taste of it and get them going and get those juices flowing, I guess, and get the compete level up. But yeah, no, I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. Sorry, John, for throwing a curveball at you there.
Oh, it's great. Love it.
Yeah, so I guess probably my biggest thing would be learning. Like, we played majority of the year shorthanded. So it was kind of my question, how do I hold guys accountable when you only have 3 lines, you know? I feel like ice time's typically a way that as coaches we're holding guys accountable. And I didn't feel like I could play that card at all this year. So I guess the one mistake, or the one thing I feel like that I would do differently, is I felt like we did a pretty decent job pouring into our leadership group, but I think that I would even go harder on that and make the accountability coming from those 4 or 5 core guys. Because yeah, quite frankly, I don't want to hold their hand all day, every day. And there's things that I absolutely need to hold their hand on. So I think going into next year, that would be a big focus for us, is creating that accountability amongst our leaders. And then they're the ones that are holding things accountable. But it was an area that I struggled with, because kids are playing at a high level of hockey. And to me, looks like some of them could care less if they were there. So it was an area that I struggled with. But I think moving forward, it would be probably pouring into those 4 or 5 guys that are your core leaders and letting them take the ball.
Right on. Doc Dean, Trent, great to have you part of the call. Years ago, guys, Doc had a chance to coach some real successful teams. Doc's a chiropractor, and his one son actually just committed to Camrose in the AJHL, which is awesome. Congrats, pal. What can you share with us of things that you learned many years ago about accountability and the importance of it, whether it was bantam, midget, with the Royals years ago?
Well, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to think, or I'm going to tell you some of my experiences. But with Coach Graham on the line here, he might dispute some of that, because I coached Graham back in the good old days. So, the one thing I will say, John, that I think is quite neat to talk about is that, I coached 10, 15, 20 years ago, and then I had kids, and I coached my boys as they were going through hockey, and then I've had the opportunity to see them play pretty good levels of hockey. And I think times have changed a lot with respect to accountability, and I think a lot of it comes from the investment that families make and parents make in their kids' hockey. And so I know a lot of these guys that are coaching junior hockey or college hockey or beyond, they're not dealing with parents, but anyone that's coaching minor hockey, one of the big issues is parents are investing so much time and so much money and so many resources into their kids' hockey, they're expecting a certain level of return. Doesn't matter how good their kids are, doesn't matter whether they deserve it, doesn't matter if their kids are trending the right direction. They feel like simply because they paid the $15,000 a year to play midget AAA, they should be given certain things. And it was never that way when I coached Graham or when I coached back in the day. Everybody seemed to have a real realistic view. And maybe that was because they weren't investing the same. I mean, it was expensive back in those days, but they weren't putting the kind of money into the resources that these kids are putting into it now. So I'm wondering if some of these guys that are coaching, junior hockey, college hockey, are having to, to take some of these minor hockey players that all of a sudden are somewhat entitled or come from that environment where their parents never held them accountable. If the parents don't hold them accountable, it's pretty hard for a coach to hold them accountable, I find. And, Mike Glosson, who coached the AAA team last year, he'll be the first to tell you it's very hard to get through to some of these kids when these kids go home, have conversations with their parents, and their parents don't seem to have any objectiveness whatsoever. And it's hard to be able to develop those kids. So I don't know if I answered the question, but I guess the question I'd have to some of these coaches is, if you've been coaching for a few years or you've been doing this for a long time, have you seen some of those challenges in more recent times with respect to some of these kids that you're taking on as 18, 19-year-olds that are coming from, what I've been experiencing the last little bit? Is it a bigger challenge today than it was back when I coached 10, 15 years ago?
Yeah, why don't we throw that open to anybody? Why don't we go into a Q&A here for the next 20 minutes? Anybody to add to that point Trent just shared?
Yeah, I it's great. I got to see firsthand. I jumped right from midget AAA to junior A, and for me it was a bit of a shock. I think the biggest thing that I noticed right away was, exactly, just to Trent's point, there was, some players you can just tell right away, who's in their ear, who's saying the right things. And I think, one of the things about accountability, a lot of these players, whether they're moving from Pee Wee to Bantam, from Bantam to midget, junior pro, they're always gonna face change, whether it's a structure or it's a different coach's philosophy, and a lot of the time, the change that they're encountering with their team or their coach or whatever, it's not easy. And so I think with us, we talk about the changes that they're going to go through right away at the start of the year. We reinforce with them, just trust the process. They're not going to notice the change that day or the next day. The change that the benefits that we're going to see are going to be the end result, whether you make the playoffs or personal goals. But I think at our level, it's recruiting is huge, and it's asking those questions and digging into, asking a player a simple question that we ask, is what do you love about hockey? And I think all of us could come up with probably a dozen different answers. And I don't think that there's really we would all love our players to say winning. That's what we love about it. But I think the easiest question, the answer that we want to find is, what do you hate about hockey? And, I started this, I got this from another coach. I stole it from another coach, and he said, you'll be amazed how many don't give you that one answer that you want to hear, and it's losing. And so I think, again, just that's coming from, the environment that the players are exposed to, whether it's their previous coaches, maybe their parents were coaching them, and in our line of work now, and I think a lot of you will understand, you've got advisors, and I like advisors. I deal with them all the time, but sometimes these players get the wrong advice. There's a lot of, players, a lot of advisors don't hold their players accountable, and that doesn't help us. So I think that just getting to know your player, the players early, and having good leadership. Somebody mentioned before about leadership. That's huge. And, but I think, I think with us, we as coaches, we're going to deal with that. That's a challenge we're going to face, and we could ask all the questions and expect, hopefully get all the right answers, and we're still not going to get it right all the time. But that doesn't mean, that you give up on somebody. We love to work with players. It's a challenge, but you know what? I looked at your topic there, John, and it's a word that's used regularly in the world of coaching, accountability. And I had to think about it for a few days and kind of wonder, if we're doing the right thing, and because it's such a broad subject. There's so many different things that go along with it. But I think the other thing too that, and I hope I'm not going off topic here, is we talk about habits, forming good habits and breaking bad habits and continuously getting better and better and better. And we talk about it, and we have, someone else mentioned this before about competition. We try and implement that. And I think it's not as much talking about accountability as it is just getting the players to work on it, and it kind of just gets ingrained in them. So I hope that makes sense.
That's good feedback. Simmer, I know you're the lead within the drive with Prairie Hockey in these last 3 years, and your interaction with all the coaches you have. What can you share with us around accountability, where you're seeing success and the ingredients to that around accountability?
Yeah, thanks, John. Guys, I don't have the privilege of being on the bench anymore, but I get the chance to try and work with and develop coaches. And so on this whole accountability thing, like all of us as coaches, we have success stories and we have spots where we failed. And with athletes where maybe we gave them too much rope and it got too late in the year, and then we tried to rein it in and we lost that. So for me, I have a big belief. A guy named Andy Stanley wrote a good book one time about communication and stuff, but he talks about systems create behaviors. And so you need to, the systems that you implement are the ones that create the behaviors that you want, right? And so when we have multiple teams and multiple coaches that I'm working with, we try and actually work on systems and creating systems. And so I just was writing down some things and some awesome ideas here. And I think everyone, we're all doing a lot of the same things. But one of the things we always start with is, and we didn't do a great job this last year, I can admit that, with one of our programs, but we probably started a little late. But one of the things we try and do is a team manifesto. And the whole idea is, when I coached, I got sick and tired of being that accountability police, right? Where you walk into the arena and you feel like you have to, hold someone accountable again. And that gets exhausting and you get burnout as a coach. And so the goal is to try and move your culture. For us, the goal is to try and move our culture from a coach-led culture and a coach-led team to a player-led team. And how we do that is we start with what we call a team manifesto, and we work with our student athletes to actually set their standards, to kind of set their goals and what they want. And obviously we're there the whole time and hopefully can help direct that, right? Guide them. But the problem is, if we just start there and we set goals and we leave it, and it just kind of dies down. So from there, we do something that we call a captain's council, and that's just another system that we implement. We kind of have some clear guidelines, but we select our captains, and then those captains are responsible for a quad, right? So if you got five captains, you got 20 guys, you're kind of you got groups of 4, and actually those captains are responsible daily to be connecting with their quad. And so, Scotty Bowman, I was on a thing here recently, and he just said, without good leadership in your room, you can be the best leader as a coach, but you won't have, if you don't transfer it, right? I had Stevie Eiserman, he said, walk into the room and be able to lead. That as soon as I had a meeting, the meeting after the meeting was the one that mattered. So when the players took it into the room. So what we're doing with that captain's council is you take those 5, and then they actually take that same message to their 4. They do pregame warm-up or they do pre-practice warm-up with those 4. They connect with those 4. And if they find out that, hey, Barrett's having a bad day, his girlfriend dumped him, and it's something they can bring back to the coach, that gives us, a little bit more of a pulse right away. So that's the captain's council idea. It just allows them to establish the standards, reinforce the standards, and then from there. So those are a couple of the pieces, the system pieces that we do to try and work on the accountability and move it towards a player-led one as best as we can, but no different than what people are saying on the communication. And the competition side, another system we use is called a competitive cauldron. Every practice we will have 4 or 5 drills that are intentionally built in to be part of the competitive cauldron. Maybe it's only 3 that day, but based on your practice plan, you set them, you let your assistant coach or your trainer or equipment managers watch and practice know what those drills are, and all the players know what those drills are, and those are the competitive drills in practice. And then we actually track wins and losses, so who went head to head that week and how was their win-loss record in the competitive drills. And that gives us peer data that we can look at as coaches later, and we can make a call based on starting lineup or depth chart or anything based on what we saw from the body work that week. That was, everybody knew and got to expect. It wasn't did coach watch me on that drill to see I was working hard? And some guys surprise you, and other guys just fall right where you think they're going to fall, but it kind of takes the guessing out, right? So
that's good, Simmer. Guys, what a treat to have Kim Barnstable part of the Zoom today. Kim had a chance to coach in Estevan a few years ago, or many years ago, and also has a chance to coach university. Kim, what can you share with us on this topic of accountability? so proud of your sons too, where apples don't fall far from trees, and the desire that Bobby and Kramer have set to help others, to empower others. What can you share with us tonight around accountability, whether it's a midget story or a time when you were coaching university there in Kelowna?
I think there's been a lot of good points raised by everyone about accountability. It's a tough one to answer because it's probably maybe one of the toughest things to try and establish in a team. So I think it's just there's quite a variance of how you approach it depending on the age of players that you have. If I go back to coaching bantam, to I think Trent's point is you need to get the parents have to be on side. They have to help you with accountability. They have to respect you as a coach, and through that you can get them to be accountable. You get up into the college levels, it's a different. You have to take a little different angle, and then it's doubly important to have your leadership group on board. And I think that at that point, the accountability, you have to get accountability from your leadership group, and then that is what's taken to the rest of the team. I've found that that's probably the best way as you get into the university, into the older groups. It varies just depending on the age, but it's and of course you're dealing with a whole lot of different personalities where you're trying to make everybody accountable by doing one or two or three things, and for some it takes a different kind of an approach for sure.
Yeah, right on. Guys, can we move to the topic of team builders, where I want to just zip and be quiet, and let's just open it right up. What are our thoughts about team builders? Graham, I'm sure you threw some great shakers in Halifax for your boys. But at any level here, what can we share with each other where we were able to plan team builders, where we saw chemistry grow away from the rink?
Sorry about that. I suppose I'm supposed to turn mute off here. Yeah, it's just, it's young kids, right? So in our end of things, we just, again, do things that are really practical. We went to escape room. We did, like someone's mentioned here, pizza parties and things like that. I think the connection outside the rink is important. I know my son, who I coached, just went on Fortnite with all his buddies and played Fortnite. They've been on Zoom calls now to kind of keep the connection through this whole pandemic. So I don't think it matters. I think, it's been said here a lot. And I think that's, for me, is the interesting part about hockey. I think we can overanalyze hockey and over-systemize it, but really good teams actually create that good culture. And it starts with good leaders. It starts with good people inside that. And it's, I think if you go down the history of winning teams, I don't think there's very many that won with a bunch of that skilled them to death, right? That over-skilled them. I think a lot of it comes down through just good heart and good solid people, and so I think that's kind of created through team building. And it doesn't have to be, if you have a good culture in your team, it doesn't have to be elaborate. So I think that was really successful for us, and yeah, I think it was we had a great year that way.
I'd say from my experience, some really good team builders, and it sort of ties in on a bit of a faith slant as well. So I've spent a number of years with Hockey Ministries International, and then also with Athletes in Action, and both those organizations are well known for mission trip type events. And so what we've done for close to 30 years now, we've taken, there's actually a lot of you guys on here that have been on one of the trips with me, whether it's to Kazakhstan or Russia, Czech Republic, all throughout the Baltics, northern BC, northern Saskatchewan, all over the world, just different things. And so I know it might be a hard thing to say, okay, to a minor hockey team, hey, we're going to pick up and we're going to take a bunch of 12-year-olds to Kazakhstan. That might not fly, but and with the junior team, it might be a little bit hard too, because that's not it. But in the summertime, there's those type things. But what we've done the last couple of years too is it's just something practical, a 1 day sort of almost like a retreat, but it's not a retreat for us to be like rah, let's man in the jungle or up in the forest. It's let's go and serve downtown. Let's go serve at a soup kitchen. Let's go up, and we've done some stuff up in northern BC with some of the reserves up there, and just done some hockey camps, and then gone and played, just throw sticks on the frozen lake and have some fun over a fire on the side. And just whenever you get guys away from their environment to serve and get their eyes off themselves and all their little petty problems and some of that stuff, our guys come back so fired up. And when they graduate and you ask them like, what was it that like really cemented in your faith? What was it that really made you love hockey again? You know, because junior beat you up and everything else. Where did you sort of get pep in your step? And I was like, man, when we went up to northern BC, or when we went to, ran into the Baltic Sea, or when we went, like it's unbelievable when you think that these trips are a lot of extra work, and whether it's planning to go down and serve at a soup kitchen, how the coordination that you have to do that in terms of criminal record checks and making sure that you're safe, especially now with all this COVID stuff. It's a lot of extra work, but every time we've done it and we've taught our guys how to serve properly out of love, we come back a stronger team, and guys, like it cements and it glues in everything for them. Silence, gentlemen. I just want to share one other thing, because you guys, like, I love that we got so many guys that are impacting the young lives, and Graham and Brad, you guys can sort of speak to this as well from like at the college level. And someone had already alluded to it. Like sometimes we get like these players that are entitled, like once they go from minor hockey, from midget, say from Pete's team up to Taylor's team, and all of a sudden like there's some entitlement, and then they might come to us at the college level, and there's even still that entitlement that's there. Like for us this year, it's been really a cool journey to sort of go from the BCI to Canada West, and that recruiting journey started over a year ago in terms of us really being able to identify. And right away, the moment that we got voted in, my inbox was flooded with guys that, hey, I'd be interested in your program. And so over the number of years, we sort of track, I don't know if you can see here, I'm going to try and show you my board. I don't know if you can see that, but it's a magnetic board, and we just have names with all the guys that we want to contact. And we filter them out initially. We talk to coaches, we talk to billets, we talk to teachers in the community, and we say, is there any moment where you pause and say, that guy's not a good culture guy? And if they are, then we delete that email. We don't follow up with it. But if they pass the first meter, like the test, that filter, then they go on my board. Okay, so like I said, that's this board. And over here is the guys that we've recruited and signed to a letter of intent. The bottom guys down here are guys either down the future. And then this column over here is what I just want to express. There's about 30 guys over here. That's my discard pile. And some of those, well, I'd say out of the 30 guys on the right-hand side there, the first contact that many of them had was their dad called me, or their dad sent an email. And I see Brad smiling. Like almost instantly, they get slid over to the right side of my recruit board, because they're 21 years old. I don't want to be dealing with that anymore. In fact, it's illegal. I can't even tell that dad how their kid's doing in university if I'm following the strict rules. And so that's one part of it where I say, as you guys are coaching at the midget and bantam and even at the junior level, I'm so shocked at how little these guys know about what the recruiting process is for the next level, and teach them to pick up the phone and phone me. Like don't get your dad to call me, pick up the phone and call me. And sort of spinning off of that, if we signed every guy that we talked to that was on the top of our list, man, we'd already be in the show, right? So we get rejected all the time. And I was just sharing with my wife, we were walking the other day down at the park and just talking about like this entitlement with athletes, the young guys coming up. And I'm so glad when I don't get a guy that, and here's how I find out that they tell me I'm not going to play hockey anymore, actually, coach. Like, you flew out and we wined and dined them to, come and play golf while you're around here in BC, and it's going to be awesome. And you can, whatever else, just like trying to do all we can to get them. And then he says, yeah, I'm just not interested. I just don't know if I want to play the game anymore. Like, okay, sorry to hear about that. Best of luck to you. And then 5 days later, he signs at another school. To me, that's such a garbage move. And that speaks to character that I'm glad I actually didn't get that guy, right? And so what I really love, even though I don't get guys sometimes, is when they sign at another school and they call me back and they say, hey, coach, I just want you to know I signed at UBC, or I'm going to York, or I'm going to Briarcrest, or whatever. Like, just the fact that they would call back and say, like, I thank you for the opportunity tells me that at the junior and midget level, they've been taught exactly how to present themselves, how to be a leader. And I think that is just a complete opposite of a player that's entitled and a player that really knows what he wants and how to get there. So I just say that as an encouragement to you guys. Semper, some of the stuff you guys are doing there at the academy and stuff like that, I know you're working through some of that. And I just wish there was more coaches that were doing that, really teaching their young men how to represent themselves and speak about themselves. Because I'm not interviewing the dad. I want to know what he can bring to the table. So that's just my 2 cents on the night.
John, I just thought of a story about motivation. Can I get back on that topic real quick?
Yeah, sure.
I just wanted to share. I actually, I think Dean McCammon can probably relate with this. Good. Hi, Dean. A good friend of mine played in the NHL, and he got into coaching after, and he told me a story that he was a rookie in the NHL as an associate coach, and team was losing, and he was involved in a third period intermission conversation with the coaches, and they were coming up with a game plan on what they should do and what they should say, and my buddy said, he was fresh out of the NHL as a player, and he said, let's dangle a carrot in front of them and tell them if they can pull this off and win, that they get a day off tomorrow. And he said that the head coach at the time was a little hesitant. No, we gotta. And he said, I'm telling you, I'm a former player, and rest is huge, and guys know that they can go out, maybe blow off a little bit of steam, and they don't have to get up early. It means a lot. So he said, all right, go ahead. You go and tell them. So he went and told them, everybody cheered, and they ended up walking out, and they ended up winning the hockey game. And so we got into a situation this year, and we were playing a team in our league, and we were down by a goal and going into the third period. And I was talking to my associate coach, and I told him the story quick. And I said, you want to try this? He said, yeah. And I said, okay, well, you go in there and do it. So he went in there and he told them, okay, guys, you know what? If we can find a way to dig deep and pull this off, then, green light tonight, and nothing going on tomorrow or Sunday. And guys loved it, cheered, and it was probably the best period of hockey we'd seen him play all year. We ended up pulling off a win and getting it. And that's kind of tying into the team building. I think we did some pretty cool things here. We had a chance to go to CFP Shiloh and get geared up and go out and do the training and live like a soldier for a day. We did that the past couple of years. And I think the Regina Pats and the Brandon Wheat Kings, I think, were the only 2 teams other than us prior that were able to do that. That was huge. And, we did some scavenger hunts, and our one of our motivational speakers, a local gentleman here by the name of John Houghton. He's a former Navy SEAL instructor. He's actually a pretty intense man, and he took the guys out to a gun range and showed them how to shoot certain weapons that they'd never seen before. It was pretty amazing. But I think the biggest thing was kind of tying into the story I said about my friend, I think the best at our level, within the boundaries of good taste and supervision, I think the best team building that we have at this level is just letting the guys get together for a night and getting to know each other and blowing off some steam and having fun. You know, we don't let our guys go out to the bars, and we don't, you know, we obviously monitor what they do, and we get them in a good setting. But I have found at this level, and we pick our spots. Obviously, it's usually after a bit of success. I've found that just to get together with the guys, getting together, being able to, you know, party and in a good spot, whether, you know, we have a couple billets around here that have some nice cabins, and, you know, they get to bring their girlfriends or whatever, and they just have a great time. And we really notice a difference in their camaraderie and how they approach the game after that. So I thought it was interesting as far as team building, and the story I shared, just tying the two together, how important it is just to let the guys get together and make sure that you do it.
Yeah, it's so interesting, guys. I think we can all think back of stories where people were intentional to care and just made you feel like $1,000,000. And I'm probably retelling a story for some of you, but you know, growing up in Three Hills, very wet behind the ears. When I was in grade 9, I didn't know the difference between the WHL and Junior A. And I'm very wet behind the ears still. But having a chance to do a few HMIs, I had a chance to meet Dean McCammon and Curtis Friesen. And it worked out in '97 where Dean was kind and invited CFG and I to go to one of the practices. And at that time, Dean was on the #1 line with Bill Guerin and Dougie Waite. And Dean didn't have to do this, but Dean was intentional of, hey, why don't you guys come on into the dressing room? And, you know, 23 years later, it's still an impact in my life where, you know, you just naturally felt larger than life, you know, sitting in Toddy Marchand's stall. And then when it was time to leave, you know, Dean and Dougie and Bill Guerin all walked out together. And I think we have that power, guys, at every level to help people around us, first on helping validate themselves, where they understand what they're good at. And then with your micro macro plan, instilling different character traits, whether it's the team builder, whether it's how you're rewarding ice time or working on the right line combination, where some of those stories that you're writing, those things that you're influencing your players on, like your players are going to remember them for the rest of your life. Like, what am I, 45? And I still tell the story to tell it to lots of people, where Dean didn't have to do that, but he did. And we have those same opportunities with people around us where we can be intentional and build that person up. And it makes a difference. And again, Dean, I want to thank you for that, because you didn't have to do that, but you sure made Curtis Friesen and I's day that day.
You're welcome. I'm just surprised I was on the first line.
Anybody else maybe has a story to share around team building, or something that's on your mind right now that can just encourage us all? It might be on a different topic. We're at 8:08, and I think we're planning on ending at 8:15. Again, so thankful for everyone that's a part of this call right now.
I would go here, John, one more time. Just on maybe connecting each of the topics, it kind of dawned on me just listening to the first thing I said was kind of we call it the currency, but it's the ice time part of it as our motivation, because we didn't have the problem with motivation as far as once the game started. But the team building and the accountability, we kind of connect with kind of at the start of the year, establishing what is the other the accountability part, and really just simplifying what accountability means to our organization, and to me as the coach of it is just pulling your weight, doing what is expected of you, and things like that. So, you know, what they need from me and my coaching staff is they need to develop and hopefully get opportunities like the one, you know, at Trinity Western or York or an NCAA or anything like that. And what we need from them is their maximum effort. And so before we even start talking about, you know, whether they're, you know, coming to us with, you know, like all the young kids now get the, you know, the bad rap of being the kind of the buzzword that I can't even think of right now, but coming into your program and expecting too much and not giving anything like that. So the very first meeting is kind of, you know, what we call the kitchen counter accountability meeting, where we're a family. We all have our own little piece in this puzzle that is the Edmundston Blizzard and junior hockey in general. And we get a pretty good set of team standards rather than rules. And so the leadership group can kind of take that over. It becomes kind of the motivation is because it's their own rules, because it was something that we all agreed upon at the start of the year. And because that's the accountability, you know, that this is what's expected of you, and in return you get what's expected of me, and in return when we all get, you know, what we're expected to do, then we get to play in front of 2,400 people, and they get to buy all our sticks, and at the end of the journey, you know, we all get what we're looking for, which is maybe one step up higher in the ladder and on to the next chapter, you know, whatever that may be. So it just kind of dawned on me that all of these things, you know, are you know, connected in one way or another, and every opportunity, you know, Taylor was mentioning that the boys getting out for a night on the town was important, but I think the guys getting out, whether it's a night on the town or you know, a night in the hotel room, we had some of our best team bonding was actually in snowstorms where we couldn't go any further and we had to pull over and stay in a crappy hotel outside of Moncton or whatever. It really was just the time spent together, and I think someone else touched on it, the players knowing that you care about them, and you know, that this isn't just a chew them up, spit them out. You know, while we're chewing them up, we want to make them a little bit better and mold them into something more usable for the next step in their life, which hopefully we understand what that is too. So just kind of wanted to, you know, it was on my mind that maybe all these things, you know, can be connected, and it's an ongoing conversation that your players and the coaches and, you know, the billet coordinator and everyone you've got in your organization should kind of be working on together.
Yeah, that's great, Emery. Oh, that's great. Guys, I want to say.
Oh,
go ahead, Paul.
My name's Paul, guys. John's my brother, and appreciate the chance to be on here, Cakes. But yeah, just on the idea of team bonding, a couple thoughts. I heard someone share the other day that there's team bonding and there's team building, and that's something I hadn't ever separated the two, but thought it was interesting that there's different values on each side. I think also some things that we've tried to do. I coach volleyball at post-secondary institution, but how to create trust and vulnerability isn't always really natural in the group, but having guys to try and share just a little bit of their life story has helped create and start the process of some deeper connection. Another thing we've done at times is having a guy, we call it the hot seat, where a guy's just sitting amongst the team and other guys can share what they appreciate about that guy. But vulnerability, it's not always natural for us as guys, but I think that those have been powerful, impactful things. And obviously everyone's in it to win, and we want to win, but when there's that special cultures created, I know looking back in the past, I think a lot of athletes do look back and say, yeah, we're in it to win, but the relationship development that's been built is pretty special to look back on as well. And so how, as a coach, you know, it's hard to sacrifice time. You want to practice, I want to practice, I want to improve my team, but how to consciously sacrifice time so there is just opportunity for that relationship development to be built just naturally amongst the group is is a sacrifice, I think, well rewarded when the program or the year's done.
Yeah, that's good, bro. Guys,
Yeah,
anyone
that's
else
good,
to
Paul.
share to that?
Well, I was just going to say one thing, John. I mean, I haven't done this myself, but talking to another coach who coaches Division I golf in the States, and he was just saying he has a girls golf team, and they're pretty tired. It was a couple years ago, and you could just tell they were off in practice, and so he just called practice and pulled them all in, and they'd been working through a book, and so he just pulled out a book they were working through, and they all just got together and read, and just did like a team bonding and that, and just still use their practice time, but at a different kind of mental level, just to develop it. And I know that a lot of people just had different feedback towards him, but anyway, went on to win the NCAA national championship that year as well with that group. So it was a neat story on his part, but just how are we taking our time to build that, right?
I've had quite a few players that were recruiting and returning players I've talked to over the phone, and almost every one of them, you know, they're really concerned that they're not going to get on the ice at all. There's no ice. There's nowhere to skate, and I think you know, obviously with what's going on right now is a big change, and you know, we all have to play our part and stay positive, and you know, but I think back to when most of us probably in the off season, I'm not sure. I know I never stepped on the ice until probably mid-August, and any of the conditioning that, you know, that we did, it was either playing lacrosse or baseball, whatever sport, and, you know, jogging, and, you know, and I think that you know, we're going to see a different athlete when we all get going here. I think that you know, there's not going to be, you know, that I almost, you know, there's a lot of elite hockey players now, young players. They're 12-month hockey players. They don't ever get off the ice. I know that there's some pretty prominent, you know, coaching figures that have tried to get, you know, families to buy in. That's not necessarily the way to go. I know Sutter was one of them. I read a great article that he was a part of that talked about multi-sport athletes and taking some time off. I'm really excited to see, you know, and I'm hopeful for training camp at the end of August and hockey again in September. And I'm really excited to see the difference in not only how the players look, but just their mentality, their approach, and being away from the game, being away from the ice for 4 or 5 months. I've got a question for Dean McCammon. Dean, you grew up in Grant Cache. How often when did you start hitting the ice when you were a youngster, and say Adam, Pee Wee, Bantam, midget? I mean, there probably wasn't a lot of ice in that, you know, part of Alberta.
No. I mean, we wouldn't even have ice until they were ready to start hockey. So that would be, you know, once school started, I think maybe the ice went in, and yeah, it was already starting to turn cold before we started practicing and whatnot. So yeah, as a kid, I think I did the Edson hockey school one time, and then that was about 11. And then I think 12, I did the one hockey ministries camp. So, I mean, I did do a hockey school in the summer, but, you know, nothing like what they do today.
I'll just share really quick because I know we got a lot of head coaches on here. I was going to share this earlier, and then I missed the ball on it. So I'll just throw it out there. Just another story just from Brent, but I thought was kind of relevant to what we were talking about, probably about half an hour ago. But his latest thing about, I think it was Trent that was talking about it, about how the players have changed in the last 10, 15 years. And his biggest thing was the 80-20 rule, and how back about 10 years ago, it used to be, as a head coach, you'd walk into a room and you knew that 80% of the guys would be dialed in and ready to go. And there'd be that 20% of guys where you'd have to worry about making sure they have things set in place and their routines and all that stuff. And how in today's game, it's totally flipped, and the switch is flipped. And now it's the exact opposite, where you got 20% of the guys on your team that you can kind of trust that are going to be ready to go. but you got to have a game plan in place for the next 80%. So that was coming from Brent, who's been doing it a long time. So I just figured with all the head coaches on here, that'd be kind of a neat thing that I'm sure that they're experiencing the same thing. So I thought I'd throw that out there. That's kind of goes back to accountability again, and just being prepared now to, you got to have something ready for most of the team and not expect that they're going to be ready to go like they used to be, or maybe when we played back in the day, we were ready to go. Now kids aren't quite dialed in as the way they were before.
That's great insight there, Kramer. Appreciate it. I got to run, gentlemen. One last thing from my side. I know Brad and I talked about getting together and chatting over the phone, and we still got to get towards that. But once I've said it to the group when we started this a couple weeks ago with Brewster. Anytime my phone and my email is there. I'd love to chat with you guys more than just every 2 weeks. So please feel free to contact me. I'll try to make time, and hopefully that's receptive on your side, that we can share ideas more than just every 2 weeks on the Zoom call. I would hope it's just sort of be building trust that we can carry that into our careers and help sharpen each other's swords and continue that forward. So I just sign off right now because I got some tacos waiting in the kitchen, and my wife's giving me the rolling her eyes at me. But I do appreciate each of you guys, and look forward to these calls. But like I said, let's not hesitate to reach out in between time as well. So have yourselves a great night.
Right on. Thanks, Barrett. Guys, thanks for making time. It's 20 after here already, and personally, I really enjoyed having a chance to listen, and I know not everyone shared. For sure want to hear from you next Zoom if you didn't share today. Can you please send me a short email with an idea or a topic around discussion for the 20th? And again, if you have an assistant coach, if you have a friend that's, it's not about levels. It's about how can we continue to improve and learn from each other. I know there were 7 or 8 coaches that wanted to be a part of it this evening, and they plan to be a part of it on the 20th. But to the point, thanks. And it's recorded, so I can easily send it to you if you want to share this call with somebody else, and look forward to the next Zoom on May 20th.
Thanks, Johnny.
Thanks, John. Good job.
Thanks, John.
Organizing, bro.
Thank you.